Yakuza, or Yakuza if you only know the English language, or Ryuga Gotoku if you live in Japan and have multiple Kiryu body pillows, is a phenomenal series whose premise somehow embodies the serious, hard-boiled drama that could make your favorite telenovela jealous, yet has all the outrageousness that will remind you that you are in fact playing a Yakuza game. The story of Kiryu, plus some notable chads, and their life and times in Japan involving the different criminal organizations. A slice of life, if you will, that has managed to create a unique identity of mixing the serious with the not so serious to bring an experience that fans know and love. So memorable, in fact, that there are more games in the franchise than I currently have brain cells, and I only have the one. It's been 20 years since the Sega team created the series, with its humble roots starting off on the PlayStation 2 as Sega's version of an open-world game set in the fictional Kamurocho. This was in fact my very first Yakuza experience, as Kiryu's epic tattoo on the video game cover was one of the coolest things I've ever seen in the PS2 catalog. I did play it as far as my one-child brain cell could take me, but let me tell ya, trying to take a dip into Kiryu's debut game with its composite video age was fun, but quite rough.
久しぶりやのKiryu-Chan!
If you're already familiar with Yakuza 1's story, thanks to Kiwami, or watching your favorite VTuber whom you need clippers to translate for you, then the OG version is exactly what you've already heard. Kiryu Kazuma, the dragon of the Dojima family, is an extremely charismatic textbook definition of a manly man who only understands the way of the criminal underground organization because that's all he's ever known. Please see Yakuza 0. While trying to go about his normal routine of being an unbeatable badass, either due to plot armor or his muscles, Kiryu reminds everyone that he is best bros with Nishikiyama-san. Nishiki! Also, let's not forget Yumi. But unfortunately, Kiryu finds that his two childhood friends have accidentally murdered the head of the Dojima family, Dojima Sohei, and his only course of action is to ensure that both of them go scot-free while Kiryu-Chan takes the fall. If that isn't the most altruistic act in all of Japanese video games, I don't know what the hell is. While trying to serve out his 10 years in the joint made him a pussy sentence, a few things go awry. Yumi goes missing, 10 billion yen is stolen from the head of the clan's coffers, Nishiki is going through his villain arc, and Shinji has been unable to grow any hair since the last time Kiryu saw him. What follows is Kiryu trying to find the missing puzzle pieces and uncover what is truly going on behind his friends and colleagues. Very Yakuza-esque gritty crime drama with the right amount of Japanese-style dramatization that manages to make each character, especially Kiryu, very fun to watch. Having already heard the story through Kiwami, I was more prepared to see how the plot points and storytelling differed. And to my surprise, pretty much 99% of the game's original story has not been altered in any way. It still feels over the top and gritty thanks to all the personalities and Kiryu having the embodiment of don't f with me protagonist aura.
Kazuki, 優也ってやつの言う通りだ。こんな奴らに金を渡す必要はねえよ。
Also becoming a foster dad to Haruka.
水木、お前のお母さんな。
But even with it being the first iteration of the franchise, it's cool to see just how much that identity has remained intact. The tone and pacing of the original is exactly the same in Kiwami as well. Not as wacky considering the remake editions, and I think OG Yakuza is the most serious of the lot. I'd say the biggest change that I think Kiwami did much better was Nishiki's story. In the OG version, we don't get that perspective of Nishiki spiraling out of control while Kiryu was in jail, so all we really see is Kiryu's point of view and the game inferring what was going on with Nishiki behind the scenes. An addition that I think makes the Kiwami version vastly superior in its storytelling. A little unfair against the OG though, considering Kiwami was a follow-up to Yakuza 0, and that game also has an important focus on Nishiki's character. But even I think a bit more could have been said about Nishiki in the OG version, because we really don't get much of him story-wise, and Kiwami paints him better as the rival villain. Coming from the remake, a lot of the more wacky and fun bits are completely missing in the OG version, specifically the side stories that the modern Yakuza games have always made very fun. They are there, mainly as combat encounters, but never to the extent of the oddball side jobs that Kiryu had to go through, most especially the Majima everywhere, but I consider that to be more of a Kiwami exclusive. I do like the contrast with making the side missions feel goofy and funny compared to the main story. A nice change of pace when you want a break from either the melodrama or goofy side questing. And so it kind of stinks that you don't really get that contrast in the OG version since it's pretty much always serious the entire time. For the most part. Leaving Haruka outside while you go to a massage parlor is a bit questionable. Oh, so that's what they mean by getting milk. Oh, but I should mention that trying to go through the story with the original English dub nearly gave me an aneurysm.
Hey, the f*** you think you're doing? Just what the f*** family are you from, huh?
As someone who is slightly above Nihongo Jozu, hearing the English dub and the gratuitous amounts of swearing used for every variety of scene in the game almost ruined the character experience. I won't fault the voice actors too much, because trying to do an English dubbing for a game in post is already difficult onto itself, and the production team has some pretty big voice actors, including Mark Hamill, John DiMaggio, Michael Rosenbaum, Michael Madison. There's some seriously good talent here. Daryl Kurylo, I think that's how you pronounce it, does a decent job as Kiryu, I'd say, given how much he has to really sell the character with post-dubbing work.
Got it. I'm on my way.
But man, is the translated script just very bad to hear. Lines from the original Japanese text, thank you Korone for playing the original, are taken way too aggressively in English and makes many of the characters sound off.
I'm supposed to believe this shit as you're packing up, getting ready to bail out?
For a game that is taking place in Japan, that sense of actually being immersed in the Japanese culture and environment is completely thrown out the window as a result. I mean, I get it. It's the early 2000s, and the Western market was such a dominating force for the console era at the time, so I can see why Sega might have pushed for English dubbing. But it's literally a case of lost in translation, and the game loses a lot of identity for it. But thank goodness for the restorative emulated version that gives the Japanese dub with English subtitles. Hearing Kuroda Takaya, Nakaya Kazuhiro, Ugaki Hidenari, who by the way still lend their voices to the characters even today, only feels right.
またおめえに先越されちまったか。
なあ、錦。お前、妹はどうなんだ？
来月、もう一度手術だ。多分、次で最後になる。
最後？
Again, not trying to discredit the English voice actors, but the translational work and directing was just not really up to snuff to begin with. Still, OG Yakuza's story is as gritty Japanese crime drama as ever, and a lot of that melodrama isn't all that different from the modern iterations. It's even cool to see that Kiwami retained pretty much all of the elements that made it such an interesting premise to begin with, but also managed to make it even better thanks to the additions to Nishiki's story. It's over the top for sure, but that's honestly what makes the Yakuza games so much fun to go through, even with this version being the first iteration.
死にてえやつだけ、かかってこい!
While I love that the brawler aspect has always been the fun, head-empty button mash combo fest that the Yakuza series is known for, obviously up until the Ichiban saga, it was a bit rough to experience where it all started. First off, for those who aren't already familiar, Yakuza is a third-person open-world action game taking place in the fictional location of Kamurocho, where Kiryu gets to visit a variety of different locations for both story and pleasure. You'll essentially be hopping from chapter to chapter, being told to go to specific locations to make progression, but how much you want to explore Kamurocho is ultimately up to you. While going around, a large part of the game, and for some reason it's just a common occurrence in the district, is that so many gang members, hooligans, and whatever other noun the game tried to think of, loves to pit them against you. So, combat is the main gameplay focus, while you're not trying to go around Kamurocho. Punching other dudes is pretty simple. You have your light attack, which you mainly combo with, and you can weave in a finisher using your heavy attack at the end of any string. You also get a grab, which you can pummel people with, or throw them on the ground. That same grab button can also pick up weapons, which can make a difference when fighting large crowds. Most iconic of all are the heat moves, which act like stylish attacks that do a lot of damage, as well as looking a bit cinematic. Later moves also become available when you level up, which can be extremely helpful when the combat starts to get tough. As far as trying the 1.0 combat, it's really not all that different from its current brawler iteration, and it still manages to scratch that beat 'em up itch. A bit on the older side considering the slower performance and design. But in terms of complexities and stringing together combos, I found that the different moves helped with managing certain scenarios, like the gut punch combo helping crowd control, the long string combos for defeating a single target, and the running dropkick when the crowd starts pissing me off. Even if the game only uses the single style combat system, the different moves feel like they have a purpose. That said, the execution and management of the combat becomes really, let's just say mendokusai, because of the enemy design and controls. Certain enemy groups feel fine to brawl, and they can be manageable with the right moves. But when you get things like enemy attacks perma-stunning you by having their moves overlap, items like tasers keeping you stun locked, and bosses like Majima, who look like they were designed by Majima himself to be punishing, the overall experience is a bit let down because of how tough it is. It also doesn't help that some levels are straight up too claustrophobic and enclosed to see where anybody is going. I did have fun with the combat for the most part, but some fights just felt like they didn't get a second look to be made more fun or appropriately challenging at all. My saving grace with surviving the game was to buy as many health items as I could, so I have to give thanks to the local pharmacy. But the most glaring issue with combat is how often it occurs when trying to make progress. Mission fights and such are appropriate when they take place, but the sheer amount of random encounters in the overworld is ridiculous. The problem with this iteration is that certain fights are unavoidable because the NPCs are too close to outrun, and it doesn't help that the load times for making them start does take quite a while. Well, at least the music's good. It was fine the first couple of times, but when you just want to get to your next mission or side location, it really starts to get annoying. The actual frequency seems about the same in Kiwami, but it's made less fatiguing in the remake by how fast the combat takes place and actually occurring on the spot in the open world, thus making them fast and seamless to transition to. It also helps that there is a buffer time before the enemy starts chasing you, so it's much easier to skip fights if you want. Now, considering that this is the first iteration, I was okay with the side stories and minigames not being the most well developed and abundant, and seeing what was available for the OG version felt appropriately fun for what it is. It's not quite as complex as Mesu King, but who knew getting a massage would require this much minigame attention? I've always thought the Yakuza series was an easy to play beat-em-up open-world brawler with the occasional side content to have fun with, and the first game still embodies that spirit even if it is a bit old. But the clunkiness and execution with certain parts in the combat really drags down the fundamental experience, making it not play as well as it should.
俺は登場界4代目桐生一馬だ
For the PS2 generation, Yakuza isn't half bad, but not the most technically impressive compared to some other PS2 titles that were really pushing the envelope, and especially compared to the newer generation games coming out. Plus, you know, PC was still a thing. But for an old title, it's cool to see how fictional Tokyo is portrayed, and the game excels at trying to capture that night city-like vibe. I think it's considerably impressive how they've managed to populate levels with a number of NPCs that make the town feel alive. Sure, it's not quite as large as other open world games that make everything feel interconnected, but it's great to see that they try to make the city feel as organic as can be. Performance-wise, it could be better, and trying to load into specific segments of the game isn't the fastest. I don't think they take too long, but it becomes very noticeable when you're trying to transition from different scenes or different levels, most especially when you have to fight groups over and over again. There's definitely other games on the PS2 that have better technical performance than OG Yakuza. As for the assets, Kiryu in-game looks really good as can be. He, alongside a few other characters, have very clean and distinct models. Kinda funny though how the other NPCs look like the complete opposite. I do like that it tries to use in-game assets for a few scenes, but occasionally switches to pre-rendered animations for a few others. But even if the visual aspects aren't the best, the sound profile of the game is considerably better than I thought. The mix of music and voice acting are what solidifies it as a Yakuza game. The hard rock music and groovy upbeat swings make the combat encounters feel extremely stylish and cool, as Kiryu beats the ever-living crap out of most of the enemies. But the voice acting, English cast aside, is arguably what makes a Yakuza game very Yakuza, and the story and performance of the OG still click with me today. Kuroda-san as Kiryu is still as manly as ever.
もう戻ってこないのか。さあな。また伊達さんから呼ばれることがあれば来るかもしれないぜ。
Ugaki-san as Majima is fun and crazy, even though his screen time is short.
Kiryu-Chan! わしゃ、嬉しゅうてたまらんのや。
Nakaya-san as Nishiki brings a kyodai tear to my eye.
決着をつけよう。
ああ、決着をつけよう。俺たちの戦いに。
And old-timers like Kazuma, Shimano, and Jingu bring the machismo, overly dramatic personalities that the series is known for.
風間さん、これは神宮との約束なんです。
女子供を犠牲にしてまで守らなきゃいけない約束ですか。そんなもんがあるわけねえだろ。
It's amazing to see where it all started and how much the series carries that essence today. I do think Nakaya-san did a much better job with Nishiki in Kiwami, but again, that's mainly due to the remake actually focusing on the character more. Plus, you know, being a follow-up game to Yakuza 0. The one major difference I noticed was the character of Shinji having a different voice actor in the original. In Kiwami, he is voiced by Sugita Tomokazu, who you may know for Gintoki and Joseph Joestar, but in the original, he is played by Yamaguchi Takafumi.
兄貴、
ああ、
すみません本当。こんな取り立てに出張ってもらうなんて。
気にするなって言ったろ、シンジ。
はい。
兄貴。
あ
あ。すみません本当。こんな取り立てに出張ってもらうなんて。
気にするなって言ったろ、シンジ。
はい。
While I don't think either portrayal changes Shinji's character that much, I do think it kind of changes the dynamic with Kiryu in terms of his seniority. Not completely game-changing for the story, but just something I took notice of. While I would say the visual presentation is starting to feel its age, it's the character acting that still makes this game. The drama and voices are what has always made Yakuza's story so overtly serious and fun, and I'm happy that the first incarnation sounds great, and the reason the series has its tone. So while I'm glad that the Yakuza fan in me finally got to experience and finish the very first game, if I could go back in time before this playthrough and warn myself, I would have just said that you're honestly not missing much. Sure, there's something cool about experiencing how it all started, but considering that Kiwami currently exists, that game is easily the best way for players to jump into the franchise for its better quality of life gameplay, and even retelling of the original premise, not to mention all the extra additions that make Kiryu and Nishiki's story way more interesting. Plus, you know, Majima everywhere. But what the game does is put into perspective how far the franchise has come to make it one of the most memorable in video games. And I mean, with the number of sequels and side games that came out, it's hard not to argue its continued success. Sure, the OG version is a hard one to recommend, and I really only recommend it if you are interested in retro playthroughs for the historical experience. But I will say, it's amazing to see how strong a foundation was placed to help slowly build the series into what it's become today. Seeing Kiryu's humble beginnings in creating a fantastically fun and overly dramatic franchise still manages to put a smile on my face. Now, I really should make my way through the numbered games. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. But for now, I'll see you all next time.